Hi, I'm Seamless, and it's Wednesday, which means it's time for this week's viewer track reviews. If you'd like your track to be reviewed, hop on over to my Discord channel and do up the submission in the viewer track reviews category for channels. There's a channel, and it's in the category of channels. There's also a rules channel. And you'll want to read that because if you submit it incorrectly, the moderators will indicate. Anyway, I got my visuals all up and going because somebody in the Discord asked me why I didn't do the Edison thing like I used to do, and I just said because, the truth, I completely forgot. Anyway, we're doing it right this time, and this time we're beginning with the track Penguin Cave by Wavemakist. I hope that's how you pronounce that. Wow. Okay. I was all ready for this to be a way, and then it became another way. So, during this whole section of the track here, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is a track called Penguin Cave. This sounds an awful lot like perhaps what something like someone might do for like a piece of level music, like you're in a penguin cave in a video game, and it sounds like in the background. It sounds like a penguin cave. It sounds cavey. It's got the cold, icy vibes, right? And that's what it just went on for so long that I was about to wonder. I was forming my critique around the idea that this was mixed very loud for something that would be background, something that would be in a penguin cave or whatever, like as a background piece of music, because like there's just a lot going on there, and like then this started happening, and then this happened, and then it started to make a lot of sense. So there were some choices made here about levels in your mix that I honestly can't tell which of them were intentional and which of them you also might consider to be problems. You saw me open this up while we were listening to it because I just like get a load of this harmonic activity. There's the sound in there. It's like some voicey thing that's just moving around in the background. Like I just like that. I like that a lot. is doing hell on your mix, but I like it. The other thing that's doing hell on your mix is this marimba thing. It's like, that's the most on top of a mix marimba I've ever heard. And considering the rest of the stuff that's happening, I wonder why that was your choice for main element. So ultimately, that's kind of the problem, is that there's just so much happening here that I can't focus on any of it. And I was having this discussion with a student of mine about detail and letting a listener, like, choose to see the detail if they want to see it. Like, if they wanted to sort of lay back and groove, like, they can groove. But then if they get real interested in an instrument and they kind of focus their attention on it, then what extra dimension can they see in it? And extra detail is what you want to put in there. It's kind of like a video game. You're walking around a street, you look up at a skyscraper, and you see some windows. Older video games with less ability to do this kind of thing would just have a flat image in the window. Newer video games have like an entire room in there with stuff in it, and people maybe doing things that you'll never go to or see in every single window. Like, you aren't going to look at most of those windows, but it's just in case you did that detail existed there for you to see it. And that's sort of what you want to have as a thing here, is that, like, you didn't even know that stuff was in there unless you looked. But in this example of your track, we know. This is like we entered a street and we can see everything happening in every room on every building, and we don't know where forward is. That's an overdone, hyperbolic example, because this mix honestly isn't that bad. You still preserved intensity and snap, and the music is, like, noticeable. It says that you did too good a job of putting all the detail in front. There needs to be some layering going on. Well, by that I mean, like, levels layering. Like, there's obviously layering happening here. What else? Oh yeah, so the speed of yo compression was most notably an issue in moments like this. So, like, when these sounds come in and they boof at a particular frequency, and then your compression is poofed up to attack a certain frequency, because again, you want to preserve snap and how good things felt there. What happens is that it starts to fill in the blanks because it's moving this as fast as this, and it creates these muddy frequencies. I mean, the frequencies were there, but what's happening is that they're being moved around at just stop that. It's moving around at a rate that isn't harmonic, and we can detect it as essentially like motion, and it's feeling that way in a range of frequencies, so it's getting muddy. That's what muddy is. Muddy is this range of stuff moving around too much. The problem with this though is that the reason why it sounds like that is because your compression timing. So the way that I handle compression timing is to look at something like this and understand that, sure, during this moment right here, this very full spectrum like hit happening, you want to be able, like, and especially during, like, kicks and other things for actual, like, main instruments and stuff, you want the compression to be able to, like, appropriately accentuate all of this stuff, and then also grab this stuff without putting anything up here. You might be thinking, how does it put stuff up there? It's not distortion. Well, it could be if it's fast enough. If it's fast enough to compress for really high frequency junk, that means it's actuating at, like, really high frequencies, and that these are not that fast. It's not that hard to break a base of a kick or something with how hard you're pushing up on your front end. Thing is, though, is if you do the opposite, if you make your timing nice and smooth and slow enough so that it does sound good in the bass, you're going to flub this, because it's literally not fast enough to get this to do it right. So it'll usually just be whatever was happening beforehand. And there's enough ways to, like, balance and, like, sample creation to make it kick sound the way you want to, whatever. But in a whole song context, the problem is that there is stuff happening here. There's stuff under the kick and above the kick and around the kick, and we're compressing everything all together, and we still want the kick to kick, and we want the rest of the stuff to kind of survive it. So we do with sidechaining, and we do appropriate equalizing and high passing and things like that. But the last cherry on top is really just automating your time. Automate release time to be fast at the beginnings of kicks and slow down at this rate, essentially, so that it's nice and smooth by the time you get out here. So that when you are out here, you aren't hearing, like, unfortunate frequencies, like, just being mudded up by the fact that they're just being pushed that fast because of your compression. And that, to a track that's already done, that's an extremely daunting task, unless you just have the MIDI for all this stuff appropriately exposed, that you can just link that to automation and have that do a thing. But that is how I tend to do it in the beginning of a song, is that I prepare my kick and snare MIDI to also be triggering automation to do this kind of thing to a mastery compressor. Or you can use something like Ozone 8 or Ozone anything else. A lot of other compressors, too, have automatic release time automation inside. Ozone calls it IRC, Intelligent Release Control. I'm pretty sure it's just caring about where the focus is on average frequency, and then it gives us a time that's based on that. And that's cool. That's fine. And the faster settings are kind of what you want for this sort of higher intensity stuff. But then you also want to be kind of slow and junk and cool out here. And this is the whole point of that, is that we have the capacity to understand when the best is at what point, so we can just tell it to be that, right? Otherwise, though, this was fun. It was nice and musical. I think you burned a bit on your 2K, 5K, and as a result of your compression, it doesn't come across as sharpness, which is sort of where that lives, ultimately, even though it's a whole question of phase and whatever. But it got smooshed up so that it came out kind of smeary. But cool sound design and fun arrangement. I dug it. Let us move on to another track. Oh, okay. So the way I do this for the Discord stuff is that I just have a folder that I'm downloading all the stuff into I'm just randomly picking it as submission channels. There's no order. There's no plus or minus for anyone given anything. I'm just scrolling and picking. So I scrolled and picked this guy, and I'm pointing this out because if I had found this without doing that, I wouldn't know that CP Studios, the CP stands for Chaos Pixel. Because on this page, I'm looking at it, and there's nothing that's indicating this individual's name. It's Chaos Pixel, except for the fact that on the Discord, in the link itself, in the SoundCloud link, it says Chaos Pixel. But the SoundCloud page says CP Studios. And I'm just pointing this out. It's not a great look. And that's just a business decision that I would suggest that you not do that. That's all I'm saying about that. But this track is called it's called Virtual Insanity, but it's by Sentient Gateway from Chaos Pixel. Is it a label? I'm not sure, but that's the name of this track. Let me get it into the thing. So, just because more business, when students are talking to me, and this not this, you for yourself, Mr. CP Studios, I'm not saying that this might be your goal or whatever, but if a student were to ask me about, what labels look for, how to be presenting yourself as something that label would want, that kind of thing, the very first thing I suggest is usually what I just say, to have all your social media ducks in a row. And what that means is, ensuring that people don't have those kinds of confusions. Not necessarily about CP. I mean, also just I'm Sentient Gateway Virtual Insanity CP Studios. I need to know what all of those things are. And I'm pretty sure Virtual Insanity is the name of the track. And that me and Sentient Gateway is the artist, but the relationship of all this stuff is so unclear. And you need to be able to kind of make that stuff very clear in your stuff. Just label things, list things, track playlists, and have all the art and stuff and colored themes and all that as much as you can yourself. Good to go. Again, I'm assuming things about an individual's goal here, but that's just an example of how that could be a problem. And now we're going to listen to the song. Huh. All right. Well, that was way too loud. Go figure that'd be a thing, I'd say. It got apparently that way. This about around here. Like that's that. My God. All right. Okay. So here's where I begin to question your listening environment, because the top end on this track is insane. Like there is low end and there is punch on things, but this is a very, very top ended, like focused power track up there. And the problem with that is that when you listen to something like that, like for this long, you're kind of going to cause yourself hearing damage. At least like the levels of this would sound right, because it's also just very smooshed up to the point where the real punch is not really there most of the time. And so let's talk about most of the time, because this whole track is an experience. There's just so much differences and different things happening, but at the same time, there's too much, and my solution would be to make it like twice as long. So let me talk about that. Like, we were introduced to this. Like, this is a fine enough happening here. Like, this all actually felt pretty okay balance-wise. Like, if this was like the maximum burn it got. Like, you could have been less than this, but if like this feels like this was so mastered for this first, and then that got piled on. And then the halftime sections too were interesting. This bunch especially, because like this didn't seem like to progress much. Different stuff was happening, but the stuff did not change. It was largely, especially that didgeridoo thing that was like the same the whole time. That can be a choice if you like it that much. I don't, and particularly enjoy it for 5 minutes like that. But in particular, it didn't go away when we were doing this part either. Like, it's a fun sound and all, but also this section happened, like this was the fancy varied breakup that happened the same way 3 times in a row, and then transitioned into nothing, and then happened immediately, like, or maybe 4 times in a row. Like, I couldn't even see it in there, but like the point is, then there was no transition. Like, the transition was gonna be the next comment. I just kind of went back to doing that. So here's where I talk about my solution about making this longer. This whole thing could have been 1 song if you added some intermediary kind of breakdown bits. Like, this build-up could have been from lower to about this. Like, we could have done less than this and gotten up to here, and then have a big melodic, like, or even not melodic, just a big breakdown. Just a big old dump in L level with some of this extra stuff happening, and then come back into this halftime thing, and then back into the main thing, progress again, and then end. That could have been the song. And then after that, like, this extra stuff you get going, with not just this part, but also, like, come back to this, and then this bit even feels so different now because we've gotten back to it. Honestly, it's also because it's very stripped down. And if we remove this didgeridoo from this thing, like if you just took the didgeridoo out of this would be a different song. You know what I mean? That's what this, I almost earnestly suggest that you part 1 and 2 this, like Pendulum with the island. You just kind of like part 1 this section and then kind of peter out with the didgeridoo, come in with something else, and then just do this and like this, and then with the same like eye towards getting your transitions in there with breakdowns. Like have breakdowns. This might have actually felt like the breakdown to you, but this was like the climax because there was so much more extra stuff happening, but it was also way too much because there was more power here than there is in the bass, which like hit and punch wise is the death knell of a mix. That's decent in my opinion. Although like this would probably work out okay next to particular hardcore genres and genres. Because those guys, for different reasons, they have that kind of power up here. Like you would match up pretty well with that. I gotta wonder if that's where you're going. I only wonder that because they often don't try to make it feel like it should have punch or work on the weight and the low end, because that's not where the focus is. So this track confuses me greatly, but it was an experience, and it did seem like something that could be extrapolated into kind of a lot if you were so too inclined. All right, who we got next? Resonance is the artist name, I think, and the track name is Hiraeth. That's the track name. You can read it. You can decide for yourself how to pronounce that. Anyway, I'm going to correctly size this thing up in the beginning instead of waiting until halfway through. There we go. And we begin. Good job. Good job. Woo. I gotta wonder if this track was designed for vocals. Just because even at this level, you can just plainly see this very big depression in the mids here. That's about where some vocals could live. So let's also look at your hats though, because even also at this level, we can see like kind of where they are. Oh, well, those are the noise bursts, but that's also that too. Especially in your intros, the high frequency burn is real. Like that previous track had some high frequency burn too, but like you were like exclusively high frequency burn. Everything below that has an okay mix. I think this is a bit bottom heavy, but it's also the type and the style, and it works. And like you've accounted for what happens when you are this top heavy or bottom heavy rather. So like I'm okay with that. I got used to it over time, so like it was a neat thing that happened to it. But this high end stuff got real. And I can see that being a thing if you had something in the mid-range to back up the weight, but there isn't at the moment, and I have to wonder it's because there's vocals involved. So if that were the case, then yes, because then ultimately my suggestion would be to either reduce this quite a bit or to match it with something in the mids. Because right now with the big weight down here and the big weight there, also some of the things that aren't cut so hard, like the guitar and kind of mid-rangey junk that's in there, I would high pass those. I would roll them off a little harder. I wouldn't necessarily high pass them any higher. Like where they end is okay. It's just that like that range also didn't need to be that powerful with how little there was happening down there. Unless everything else, like the sort of the background elements, especially because sometimes you would come in with this like vocal, and like we actually get a taste of that nice mid-range kind of fulfillment there, and then it's gone. And especially coming off on an intro that has a really big kind of like. Seeing high frequencies like that up there at the level of the low frequencies is something hard. And the hi-hats especially did not need to be that high or loud rather. Like they can be that high, you can high pass them all you want, but like they don't have to be like presently as loud as snares or kicks or anything like that. Like, and I mean that physically, like you could turn them halfway down and we'd still hear them as if they were there. And they would also not impart so much terror in your mix. Other than that, it's fully solid. There's not a lot of variation to it. Like you saw me zoom out halfway through listening to it. And it's because I wanted to see how obvious it was about the cut and paste here, and it's pretty obvious. But again, if there was an extra bit, a leady element, kind of putting it all together, this would be a fantastic track. So if it's vocals, then yay. Next track, Glissanditch by White Lion. Woo! And that a fun looking. Spectrogram. was cool as hell. That was super cool. Holy crap, you guys, this track. So I actually was fully expecting this to be like just kind of a big noise dump. Like someone did a bunch of sampling on some hardware and like because this, and then this. Oh, that was really cool. Also, so this is what it looks like when you do the really powerful high frequency top heavy loudness, but without breaking their ears. Notice on the scope levels up here. There are things that do have high present, high level loudness up there, but none of them just go flat straight all the way up. They all roll off, and all of them kind of have a bigger kind of general roll off up there. This means this lets us, because again, they literally don't have to be as loud for us to hear at the highest frequencies. So the higher you go, the lower they can still be. So it looks like they're going away, but they're not. They're still being represented to us linearly, and we can hear them that way. And you can see it in the spectrogram that they're there. They're all, and it looks pretty just tight and good. And then even when we have these moments, the concentrated kind of phaser sections where normally there's a big like emphasis on the high frequencies because they're big peaks that just pop up on stuff. But you can see that they roll off on the top there, and it contributes to allowing things to be loud without like fatiguing us for the fact that we've been hearing it for a long time in a row. So when we get to the really interesting moments, when all the stuff's happening all at once, it's all added together in a way that's not a big, like a fatiguing terror. So we don't have to push it even harder for it to still sound like reasonable. And you can see also in the output here, the kind of general truth of this. Like that doesn't sound like a low pass sound. That's high frequency present, right? Like it might not compare to some of the stuff you're doing if you're used to pushing it that high, but this is even representation, more or less. And that's why this track sounds like that. Like it sounds good. And on top of that, holy crap, like the sound design is cool. Is this hardware? Like this gets me a lot of synthy, but like hardware, like kind of analog-y vibes. There's not a lot of phase plant because I got a lot of like similar hardware vibes out of phase plant, but mostly because it forces you to work with things in sort of the way that you do with hardware. On top of that, this is excellent arrangement of what feels like random nonsense, because it's possible that this was literally an actual kind of synth output of just a thing happening, and then that was what got chopped up to be like all the kind of coolness and whatever. But like, either way, the point is like, what do you do when you have a big mountain of cool sounds? How do you arrange them into loops and stuff? And there's answers and there's ways, and hopefully you get a result like this, where like you can, even though this is lots of bleepy nonsense, there's a vibe and a flow. I just like this track a lot. Good job, Mr. White Lion. Mr. or Mrs. White Lion. Genders are hard. Anyway, next track we have up. What do we have? NJ Mandeville, Groovemeister. MP3. Okay, here we go. Woo. That wasn't bad. It was interesting because it seems like you know more or less what a good mix should sound like, and you sort of arranged all these things in a way that, like, in levels and punch and presence wise, that it kind of like adds up technically to a good mix. It's just that it feels very off for the target genre, and that could probably be kind of frustrating because the sort of traditional wisdom of, okay, cool, do a nice pre-master mix that's uncompressed and sounds cool, and then master that, and then it'll sound cool, doesn't totally translate to this type of content where the cool sound was because of how hard and oppressively we pushed it. To the point where if you did make a nice and even balanced and cool mix and then tried to push it like that, it wouldn't work out so well. So you have to make a mix. It doesn't make any sense all by itself. My recommendation is that you sort of don't do a pre-master mix. You just kind of have a master going, and it can be stupid and simple. And this is why, because you'll be making your mix to that master for the rest of the track. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 steps and 3 parameters on the master if everything about your mix is tailored to fit to it perfectly. And by that, I mean you've just been hearing it and you've been making choices for your mix based on having heard it through the mastering. And then you might notice how you would do things like push the sidechain a little harder or delay it a little longer or up the sub or even lower the sub. Okay, so sub. Let's talk about sub also. I noticed that it's there, but it's not very, like, it appears clean most of the time. It's just that it also has a lot of the first couple of harmonics versus like leaving that space open like you would in like a square wave versus a saw wave. And I think it's because you are using one of the main instruments to be your sub as opposed to a separate thing. And I think that if you do the type of mastering that I just described, that you will need to have a completely separate instrument that is just the sub by itself, under all the things that you're doing. So let's talk about all the things that you're doing. So the sound design, right? Well, what I like about your choice for moving around and the sounds you've done, where the hell was that? Here we go. Is that you get how it's supposed to be used. You get what it should sound like. That's not a great mystery to you. It's just that you've put the things in the way that appears to be that arrangement, but it's just not actually running up in the method that I imagine you think you want it to. And one of the things I think it is mostly because you just have the one sound. And while it's true that sometimes some songs do have one sound, that's all they have, that one sound is the thing that carries it. And I don't think you think this sound is the sound that carries this song. But in the other songs that do just have kind of random nonsense for sounds, that's not really random nonsense. The other sounds are basically still the same sound. It's just that they're different enough that it makes it feel like it's something different and new. So that your variation is a textural thing and not like a note or an arrangement thing. So you could keep doing whatever you're doing with this bass, just clone it up 3 times and change some parameters, and those minor differences will be enough to make it feel like a more detailed and more involved track, and it might help parse some of the rhythmic choices better. Because like some of those like da 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 da, like those switches up help better if you're switching more than just the rhythm, and also like the sound choices and that kind of thing, higher frequencies and whatnot. Your musical choices and your arrangement overall is pretty great. Like you've got a decent vision for what you're wanting to do here. You have that kind of neoclassical going, vaguely anime vibe. Kind of 90s techno dance, but why not, right? The universal suggestion about pianos is always going to be to get a better piano sample library. Some people in the comments of this video might be able to suggest some cool ones or even some free ones, but literally anything but FL keys, at least anything other than the basic default version of it, because there are some other kits in FL keys. There might even be some new ones. This last time we looked. You're also, and this is because you mixed it late enough that some of these choices were able to like survive, and actually you basically came out with this in a way that like, if this were being played against a rock band or a jazz band, this would sound fine. It's just that it doesn't really work out for this genre is all. And the genre is all about the pain of burning a track to death with distortion on the master. And let's next track. Moor. Moor by Mode No, spelled with a 3. Here we go. Woo! 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 It's like a roller coaster. Like, it looks literally like a roller coaster in profile if I were, like, looking at it from outside the park. It's a weird thing to think, but it happened. Here we go. God damn. This track is an excellent mix. This is exactly the example I could use to talk about separation. Like, look at this. This is killer. And oh boy, and it was even killer before we got to the killer part. Like, this track is super duper good. Good job, Mode with a 3. Mode No with a 3. This is also a wonderful example of, again, rolling off on the top end, because there are some pretty high frequency going on, right? That snare in particular goes all the way, or does it? Come back. Let's select things. Anyway, moral of the story, it rolls off. It's really high up there, but it still rolls off. And there's benefit. Like, you might be wondering why. Like, other than like the whole balance and and level. I tried to say level, but I said evil. That's weird. Why are the reasons why you might want to do that? And this is a wave file. And if you had a track that did go all the way up and did have that presence all the way up there, even if it was, it's still a bad idea because of ear fatigue, whatever, SoundCloud, when it would turn it into a 128 kbps MP3 stream, or Spotify with whatever they do, I don't actually know what they do now. They might actually do something better than that. Point is, the MP3 compression will wreck that high frequency fidelity a lot. So it's just best not to interact with it. And the interaction can still be minimal. It can still be there because how wrecked it gets, like how watery and lo-fi it sounds, is purely a property of how loud the frequencies are up there and how hard the cut is. So if the roll-off is gradual and nice, then that interaction won't be so huge. This one is like kind of at the edge. I wonder how this would sound, actually, in any other context. In fact, y'all will probably have to find out in the YouTube playback of this, aren't you? Because for me, it sounds crisp and nice. Oh boy, like I like a lot what I'm looking at in this track. Like the perfect separation on sub, perfect separation on like the highs and the mids and things, and then when the extra comes in, like it's cut nice. Like everything about this is exactly how you do this, and this is also like what you would see in a track if you were going to separate it so perfectly as to make it this loud. That and also let's talk about how loud it is. This felt loud and crazy and present, right? But if you were to actually we can see in the levels of this thing that's not actually that. It's not a sausage. No part of it is actually that crazy. And even in the playback here, even the main hardest parts. Like this amount of space available in something is pretty dynamic for something this hard. And what I'm pointing this out is to say that you don't necessarily have to play the loudness wars, because this could be pushed harder, but you don't need to. It doesn't need to be that hard. It doesn't need to be this hard. It could be this hard. It could be less hard. It could be whatever amount of hard that the content works. And in the case of this track, the content is pretty freaking hard. It's just that you don't have to harden it further with destructive things that might make it not sound all that great. If because you think your track is going to suffer for being too dynamic, like in the competition sphere of other tracks. No, that's not that. Honestly, can we real talk for a second? That's not actually been any kind of viable consideration since radio was like the thing. That was the only reason it was that. And like nowadays with DJs and what we can do and whatever, it doesn't matter if we gave them a more dynamic mix. They will just play it better. They'll change the levels. Skrillex drops Africa in his sets. That is not a track that's comparable loud as any of this stuff. The only reason it mattered was because of radio, and now because of streaming and singles and technology and whatever, there's no reason to care about anything other than just how dope your track sounds. That was a weird moment to say that, but I felt like it, and I did. This track kicked ass. Did I download another track? I don't think I did. I didn't. I was too enraptured by how cool that track was. Let's talk about... Okay, cool. I'm gonna download... Download... My voice sounds weird. Am I getting sick? Kataiser Dubservience.flac. Is this gonna open? Holy shit, it will. That's cool. Okay. Let's hear what this is like. Because I am randomly choosing these and I do not know what they are.
There's this rhythm, this thump, this kick. There's this rhythm, this thump, this kick. There's this rhythm, this thump, this kick. There's this rhythm, this thump, this tick that goes on in our head. This thump, this tick. There's this rhythm, this thump, this tick. There's this rhythm, this thump, this tick. There's this rhythm, this thump, this tick that goes on in our head. Clock and that ticking clock and the idea of that beat that you just mentioned, there's this rhythm, this thump, this tick that goes on in our head. I think all that stuff is connected somehow in a very deep, visceral way.
Well, so this track, clever, by the way, with the whole the cymbal dump. Where'd they go? Where was that? That was Dubservience and Kataiser. That's the name that they can't really read it that well that direction. But this I can read that one. That was nice. This is like. Obviously, whoever did this knew what they were doing. Like, it takes talent to force this much stuff together to be this loud. And can Flax be louder than 0 dB? I didn't know that. Did you see that picking? So I want to point out, like, I have this stuff on, but it's not actually processing anything. I'm not listening to it compressed. I'm not listening to it EQ. I'm just coming out of that and I'm hearing it in my ears. I had to turn that down because it was clipping. Can Flax clip? I didn't know that about Flax. I actually don't know a lot about Flax, to be perfectly honest. So, like, that's kind of cool. A. B. now we're into territory of like, cool, we've determined that you can do this. Should you do this? And this is kind of what I like about this stuff, though, is that like basically everything less than this, and I call it less than that just from a perspective. It has nothing to do with value or evaluation or judging at all. I'm just trying to say that like if you do like a lighter genre, you're doing everything that's happening in this track. You're just doing it less. So, like, the question is just, like, if you get this far, like, cool, now that you've determined that you can go this far, how far do you actually want to go? Because this is, like, maximum Ville. To the point where, like, I was literally on my desk here shielding myself from this track at the end. Because, like, I keep saying the words ear fatigue, and that's not a fake thing. That's real. I'm turning this down. Like, I'm monitoring really low right now. And, like, I could still feel, like unified pressure coming out at me by this. And it's just oppressive, but it's awesome. And people like this kind of thing. And, like, and I'm not saying I don't. I definitely have listened to my fair of oppressive tracks. And I've made my own fair of oppressive track. It's just amazing how loud this track is really, I guess, the moral of the story. Like all the stuff that you would do to make it this loud has been done. Like all the cuts and chops and the side chaining and the mixing and the separating, kinda. Like the sub was a little bit weird, but and also like there was just so much distortion happening that there's no way to even hear if there was any kind of compression problem. So good job there. And you were rolling off properly, at least a little bit on the high frequencies. So like you were still going maximum omega super loud drive, but even that you were still rolling it off. More lesson to everyone else. Roll off on your highs. Anyway, wow. Good job, Kataiser with Dubservience there. If y'all would like to submit your tracks to be reviewed next week, you can do so. Go into the Discord. It's in the link in the description of this video. There's a rules channel. Read it up and then submit the stuff. And that's how it works. Until next time, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.